Hi, everyone, and welcome to Naveem Connect, where spirituality meets the messy but beautiful reality of being human. I'm Jean, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Humphrey.
Thanks, Jean. Since it's June, Pride Month, we're talking about a concept that gets brought up a lot, but it's actually very difficult to live without: authenticity. Specifically, we want to look at what it actually takes to show up as your true self, what it costs you when you hide your real identity, and how you find the confidence to speak your truth openly.
It's a heavy topic, but hiding who we are is incredibly exhausting. To start us off, Humphrey, let's look at why this even matters so much. I mean, why is authenticity so critical for our well-being? And what actually happens to us when we choose to hide our true selves?
All right. So it's a very good question, and it's something that I've been thinking a lot lately in the last couple of months. So if you think about it, being authentic is sort of the baseline of who you are, right? Of your self-esteem, even your mental stability. Like people say, look, if you are your true self, you're being real all the time, you feel stable, you feel like, confident, you have a sense of self. It's kind of like your persona, right? Like, so when you're authentic, you're like, that you're actually talking about yourself, your persona. And I think everybody.
You mean like yourself and your persona are basically the same thing versus they don't
remember when
separate.
we were. Yeah. You remember when we were when we first met, back in the old days, we used to talk about people always show up with their representative.
Yeah.
Right? Like when you meet someone, you don't meet them. You meet your representative, right? So who you want people to kind of get to feel and so forth. So if we think about it from that perspective, right? Authenticity is not having that representative. It's just literally being yourself all the time. All right?
Yeah. Kind of. I mean, I felt like I did have a representative. It was just a much more like I only showed you a part of who I really was. Right? Not all of it.
True.
Right?
But that's different. I still
think
that's different.
You can have a representative and be authentic, right? Because you're still like you're just showing a sliver of the authentic part of you, right?
Right.
But authenticity, I think authenticity, I can't even say the word, geez. Authenticity, right?
Let's call it being authentic. Being authentic is easy.
Being authentic, I think for me, it's whether you're being real or you're acting, right?
True.
It's not something, and that I think instinctively, when you're being real versus when you're being fake.
Right. And I think that's a good point, right?
Or actually, do you? Because if you don't really know who you are, then would you know when you're being fake?
You know what? Yes, you do. So you do know. Right? Well, okay, so let's take a step back. You may not consciously know, but your body, your system knows, right? So you just call it your inner you, your soul, what makes you actually do know. Now, you as a person consciously may not be aware of that, right? Yeah. So to your point, because we're so used to kind of putting on masks and kind of being who we think people want us to be, right? Like if you think about it, it starts from when you're young in your family, right? You kind of fell into a role, like you're the academic one or you're the sporty one, right? Like I, my stepson, he was like, I call him, Shane is a nerd that had to pretend to be a sport, he's like, he's high school, he was like the sporty guy, the jock, but like at home, he would be like the most nerdy of nerdies, nerds, right? But he could never portray that outside. So it's that kind of, that when you don't show your true self. Now, to your point, sometimes we only show a part of us to people, right? So sometimes at work, let's say we just show part of us, but if we change who you are, so if you're not changing a part of you, but if you're literally changing who you are, right? Think about it. That requires energy. You like sometimes like if you go somewhere, you go to an activity and you feel exhausted, right? You come out, you're like, oh my God, like I'm drained. 9 out of 10, it could be the environment and the people, right? But a lot of it could be because you're just always pretending. You think about it, right? Like you're putting a fake persona out there for people to like you because they, you're afraid for them to know who you really are or who you really think. And sometimes,
Yeah. I'm just thinking, like, I think it's easy for you because, like, is it easier for us to know when we're who we are? Like, what happens to somebody if they don't really know who they are? How do they know if they're being authentic or not? Because if you're
right,
still in the search of like who you are, right? Then
right,
how do you know? Is it this like, I'm trying to think about it in like a feelings terms, right? Because then you
yeah,
have to really go with your instincts on this one, right? And like I always think of like if you're around a bunch of people but you still feel alone, then
mm-hmm,
you're not connecting, right? And why is it that
right,
you're not feeling a true connection, right? Is it
right,
because you can't build like real relationships until you're being real
right.
or something like that?
So, yeah, I mean, I think you do. So look, we always try to line it up and be vulnerable in the podcast, right? So I like in eventually you feel drained or like I personally and I've gone through this experience of not being myself or pretending to be somebody that I'm not. I did it on my marriage. So like it feels like you're like, oh my God, I can't be like this. Right.
Yeah.
Like it gets to a point where like subconsciously, I think you get that nagging voice. Right.
Yeah.
Now I think everyone, and this is my personal belief, everybody knows one way or the other whether they're doing it or not. Right. Like most people, sometimes like you think about it, sometimes you go, if most people knew what I'm thinking all the time or the way I am, like, oh my God, they would think I'm crazy or they would not like me, right? Like a lot of people say those comments sometimes, like, right?
Yeah.
So there is, and I actually never said this publicly, but my friends know it. So when I first started dating Sinead, we were having, we were having dinner, and I said to her, my biggest pet peeve is that I hate dumb people. Like people that just don't understand. Like if you explain stuff to them and it just frustrates me. I just don't like that. And she goes, I can't believe you actually said that out loud. I can't believe you actually said that out loud. I was like, I made a decision that either you were gonna like me the way I am, or you're not gonna like me. So like, this is like full on. But that actually turned into that like openness, right? Like it's just like, and we started that conversation, and what we landed is that like, if you think about it, most people keep their inner thoughts or who they really are, right? Even if it's just a little bit, right? Like not necessarily a major transformation, but just a little bit of who you are, only for your true friends or your family members or your husband, like those are the people that really know who you are, right? Your
Mm-hmm.
quirks, all this stuff. But most people out there may not know you fully, right? Or you may have a persona that you put out there, but when that persona becomes, it's like a mask. When you actually have to wear the mask 100% of the time and you can't be yourself, that's when, I feel like people start getting, like, that's when it hits
Exhausted.
you. Yeah, you get exhausted, you feel it, you get depressed, you're like, oh my God, right? And eventually that has to come out, right? So,
Yeah.
like, you're a fan of Carl Jung, like we talked about Carl Jung a lot. Like a lot of the work of self knowledge is to get there, right? To get to know who you are, and then go through the process of living who you are, right? Like accepting who you are and living who you are.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I
So,
think there's no way of connecting to other people when you haven't connected to yourself first. And I think that's
yeah,
why like Carl Jung's like practices or like his work to kind of understand his own psyche more and more, I think interests me, because I really believe in that, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think for me, there was consequences to me in my life when I didn't know myself well, right? Or could live a very authentic life because I didn't know myself well. I think you don't know, like, who you should have relationships with, right? And that could
Yeah.
be with like
Yeah.
social
Yeah.
circles or significant others, or even in your careers, right? Because by way of kind of not knowing yourself, unable to, like, at the core feel what is true for you, right? In your values and in your boundaries that you want to set. I think because you don't know those things, your relationships ultimately suffer.
True, right? And because you end up kind of building relationships that you don't really like. You end up kind of befriending people that if you were true to yourself, you wouldn't be friends with, right? Or
Or
you wouldn't hang
or
out in
you
those
could
cycles.
Or you couldn't be in like the worst case scenario is you end up in a relationship with a very toxic person, right? And it could
Right.
be, a significant partner relationship. It could be a friend relationship. It could even be like a peer at work relationship, etc. Right? It's any type
Right.
of relationship. But if you end up in a relationship with a toxic person, and then your gut feeling is telling you there's something wrong the entire time, right? And at some point, right, you will go with your gut feeling, and then you kind of break up, so to speak,
Yeah.
that relationship,
Yeah.
right? What ultimately
Right.
happened to me was like you start doubting yourself because you're like, oh, like, why did I let myself get in that relationship? Or why did I accept? And then you feel even more lost and like more
Yeah.
disconnected because
Yeah.
you weren't really like living your truth. And I think that's what authenticity is like living your truth. And you
Right.
might not know it
So,
like all the time, but you could feel it for sure.
oh yeah, for sure. And I think I'm hoping everybody that's listening can relate to that. Because I think everybody know you deep down, as you said, Jean, you feel it. Like you feel it in your core, like your gut feeling. You
Yeah.
feel when you're like, oh, I'm not being myself. Now the question is, why
You
do
might
you
be in
feel? Why do you
denial.
think? Yeah,
You
that's
might be in
true.
denial because
True.
denial is hell of a thing, right? But that can
Now,
only
why do you
last
think
for
people
so
do it,
long.
Gene? Why
Fear.
is that? Why do we do it?
I think fear, maybe fear of change, maybe fear of the unknown, um, maybe like fear of having to look at yourself in the mirror, right?
Right.
And see what you see, right?
Mm.
And trust me, everybody, I'm going to say this, like, I know it's really scary to kind of take a look in the mirror and see all the good and bad things about you, but honestly, the what's going to come back in the mirror, it's not going to be as bad as you think it is. Like, it really isn't.
No, it isn't. No, it isn't. It isn't. It isn't. But you're right. Like it's a lot. Like so, like I don't know. You also think like maybe they won't if it's in a romantic relationship. They won't love me if they know who I truly are. Right.
Yeah,
Like
I think it's all fear.
I think there's expectations. I also think the environment that we did, like I think like the movies, like I know for us in the 80s, 70s, like 80s, 90s, the movies had a lot to it, but these days, social media, the internet, like Instagram, like everywhere you look, right? People have like, everybody's having a great vacation, everybody's smiling, like everybody's living like their best life, right? And I
Yeah.
think that kind of forces people, especially young ones. Like I see them, they're all in the same, like they're all, you know, perfect all the time, right? Like they never let the
Yeah.
guard down. Like I feel like they're always kind of living in this kind of pretend world all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's, you know, the
Well,
reason we're bringing this whole theme is it blocks them from living, I think, fully.
well, I mean, Okay, so John and I recently went on vacation, right? And when we were out, we were looking at something. I think we were in a museum. Oh, it was Yayoi Kusama's like art exhibit that was in Singapore. And we're there, and everyone just has, I just noticed everyone is more preoccupied with taking pictures and posting it on social media that they were there than actually like they're soaking up the experience and looking at the art or her mirror boxes and like experiencing it versus like documenting it. So I think social media has gotten to a place where we document our lives, but it's not actually real, right? It's very highly curated. And then I think then we lose touch with what is actually, I guess, important. And then what is actually, if it's actually important to us, and if that importance, we lose that authenticity, because if we're doing something that's not important to us or is not a part of our values, then we get more and more feeling of isolation or disconnection.
Right.
That was a really long-winded way of saying what I said it.
No, that's but we got to the point. But it's to your point. So I'm glad you said values, because that's what it comes down to, right? Like if you're living with along your values, where you consider right in line with what your values and your thoughts are, then you're living your authentic truth. If you're not, and to your point, I think social media makes us live out, like, instead of looking in to who we are and being in line with who we are, social media forces us to look out and try to be what the outside thinks you should be. Like, it's drastic. Like, no, I gotta be like that. I gotta have, like, for instance, if I like, as an example, right? Let's say if I'm a young person and I like funky clothes, I can't wear funky clothes because right now everybody's wearing that. The style is X, right? So I gotta wear that, even though I may defer or like something else. So it is. I find it. The reason I'm bringing that up is I think it's harder now than it's ever been to be authentic, right? Because there is an expectation of you have to kind of conform, and you gotta be always living to the outside world instead of actually finding out who you are.
Yeah, and I think the lack of community also, because if you think about it, right, like social media, it was built to connect people, right?
Yeah.
But it only connects people so far, right? Or so, I should say, so deep, right?
right.
And it can be quite surface, right? Because it's only based on like what you see and the limited interactions that you can have, right? Based on a picture or whatever. What that does is it isolates the individual and prevents them from actually building like a support community and people, right? Because I remember when I was growing up, a part of finding, like, understanding who you are, it was also like your friends and how you, like, it could, a part of who, like, the things that you like to do together or the clothes you guys all liked and all this stuff. But it was also the friends that help you, like, even understand yourself, right? And be like, oh, you're not like that. You're like this. Or in your moments when you're not as confident about who you are, they're like, no, that's not who you are. Or they'll celebrate the weird parts of of your personality, the quirks.
Yeah.
Right. So I think the lack of community for people these days, and I won't even say young, just in our society, it has been really detrimental to us as individuals trying to develop.
Right.
Because we can't develop in a silo by ourselves, right? Like, we'll go crazy if we were just alone.
Right.
We need connection.
We're humans. That's what makes us human. We talked about, the messiness of being human. That's what it is. we need connection. That's what we are. That's why, on a side note, that's why I believe AI is actually going to have a long-term positive effect on humanity. Because I think it's going to force us into more community and being more human. I think that's what the end result is going to be. So, okay, so we're talking about a couple of things. So when it seems like for all the research that I did, that there's two major behaviors when you're kind of not being authentic, right? Like you see that you either hide, like you do into what's called hiding, right? That you hide who you are, or you go into the people pleasing type of mode where you just go. It's almost like going with the flow, right? Like you never set your boundaries, you never said no,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Is there any kind of way, like, is there any kind of processes or thoughts or exercises that people can do to kind of break out of those things and or identify them when they're doing it and then say, okay, I need to change?
Oh, huh. Um, I think I mean, I would assume that if you're hiding, it's baby steps, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think when you're hiding, you're afraid, right? And you're afraid that people are going to reject you for that version of who you are.
Right. I think
So
most people can relate to that. I think most people, in one way or another, could probably relate to that.
maybe you start with like small, very like, I don't know, start speaking up in your truth, like
So how
be
do we
more.
see? Okay, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. How do
Okay.
we speak up, right? Like, because most of us are afraid. Like, if you think, okay, like, not that most of us are afraid, but in one point or another in our lives, we're all being in a situation where we're afraid to speak up, right?
Yeah.
To whether you're, when you're a kid, or in work, most people either in a family or at work. But most people at work, let's say, right? Unless you're the boss, most people are always afraid to kind of spread their opinion or say, yeah, this is right. And actually, interesting, you and I were talking about this earlier today. But that's
Yeah.
how do you go over it? Like, how would we recommend somebody to say? What can we tell people? Look, if you're in a situation, let's just say very simple, on a work environment, and your boss comes around, like Office Space, and tells you, gives you, parades you that in a meeting or gives you something and you disagree. How do you stand your ground and say your truth, or at least set a boundary in a way that's healthy? How do you do that?
I mean, I've always said, and you know this, Humphrey, is like, it's not what you say, it's how you say it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think you take a second, right, to kind of gather what your thoughts are and what your preference is for something.
Right.
And then I think of like as much empathy as I would want somebody to give me in what I'm saying. I employ that energy into what I'm going to say to that person when I'm setting
Right.
either a boundary or when I'm stating a preference.
Right.
Is that fair?
No, that's
I mean,
no. I think that's fair. My advice for those of you who are listening, not my advice. I shouldn't say advice because it's not advice, but more like my experience has been that having that conversation, or standing and saying, as Jean said, saying the things that you feel it's saying, uh, usually goes a lot better than what you imagine in your head. Because I find people personally, when I've been in situations, you start thinking, oh, if I say this is going to happen. You play out the situation, right, based on your previous experiences or whatever, or what is in your head, and that usually blocks you from actually doing it. So for anybody listening, usually it is better and it goes smoother than you believe is in your head. And just try, like we always say on everything. I realize that we always tell people, just do baby steps, take a breather, do this, do it small steps, right?
yeah,
Don't go
for
ahead
sure.
and get it don't go to work and do it on a all hands meeting. Don't stand up and don't start an all hands meeting. Do it in a small group. Start in a small group to get your confidence. But you'll see that I think people, for me, the realization when I went through this process was it actually was a lot easier than I had put it on my, you know, like things went smoother and nicer than I had imagined in my head that they were going to go.
Yeah, and I think that once you start like those baby steps of like telling people what your preferences are, and then
Right.
there's bound to be people in your life that have those same preferences, right? And then that's what
Yeah.
helps you find your people, your community, right? Because
You
it
find
ends
your
up
tribe.
being like, oh, you know, you think this way too, like, oh, okay, and then you guys can like talk about why you think those things, and it could end up that person can challenge other ways of thinking that you have, or you can learn more from each other on the same
Right.
perspective.
Right.
So yeah, I think starting off, if if you don't, if you're hiding and you don't speak up, right, start with just baby steps of just interjecting your opinion.
Right.
Or I shouldn't
And
say interjecting. Interjecting is the wrong word. I would say off, like when people ask for your opinion, like have one and share
right.
it. Leave
Yeah.
yourself open to sharing it. I know, because I know you're thinking like, well, what if, they don't agree with me, right? But
Right.
when you open yourself up to that small risk, what you could get back is the value of that of a connection that you've made with somebody. And
Right.
if you don't make that connection, that's also valuable too, because now you know, hey, that's not your person, and you want to stay away from that person.
And that's okay. Look, and I think, I mean, look, I think one of the things that we don't talk as much in the program, but I think this is the right potential. It's okay. You don't, as opposed to what you see in social media and TV and movies, life is not like that. You don't, not everybody's friendly. Not everybody gets
You don't have to
you,
be friends
right?
with
It's
everybody.
okay. You don't have to be friends with everybody, and but the people that really, really like you are going to be there. And if you're always truthful, what I found is people may not like you, as in like they're not going to be your best friends, but they do respect you, right? So, and they appreciate the fact that you're honest and you're yourself. And that's the key part, right? When you live your authentic life, people gain respect. They do respect you, and and they appreciate that you are that way. Now, they may not be your best friends or whatever. As Jean said, you have, but you'll
You
find
have
those
to find
people,
your
right? So
people.
don't be okay with that. It's okay. It's all right to be like that, I guess. That that's part of going through the process is to knowing yourself, is being comfortable with that. You're not going to be everybody's cup of tea, and that's okay. That
That's
is all right.
okay.
As long as you are yourself.
I was going to say, so what happens then for like, so we're talking about like, okay, it's okay if you don't agree, right? But what if like the person's not hiding? What if the person just agrees with everybody and they just conform? Right? Because they feel the pressure to conform
Yeah,
because they
yeah,
don't want
yeah.
any, but that it's not hiding, but it's the same thing. You're still not being authentic.
Yeah, yeah, because you're trying not to create any kind of conflict. You're just trying to go with you're doing that because you're trying to go with the flow.
Yeah. So
So that's
any
an interesting one.
tools or habits or
Yeah,
anything from
actually,
that?
there is, and I realized that this one. It's actually the solution for a lot of the things we bring in the podcast, but because it works.
What are you going to say? The
Take
pause?
take a pause. Take a pause. Take a break. No, but it's like we always say, right? That when you find yourself kind of going in that direction, literally stop, take a pause, the reason it works and the reason we keep bringing it up is because that forces you to be aware of what's happening, right? And once you're aware, right, it makes you conscious. Then you can kind of stop, think of it. Do you really want to accept that or say yes to that, or do your gut you say no, right? And at least that second or that pause you're taking will let you know whether you're being authentic or not on the response, right? You
Yeah.
may end up saying yes because you want to say yes, but you're not doing it out of habit, right? You're
Yeah.
doing it because you're being conscious. And that's what, I realized preparing for today, I realized that that is the trick. I mean, it's not a trick. It works because it's, what we've been trying to impart on everybody. And I think it's just part of the self-discovery process is when you take a pause, it helps you sort of snap, right? Like take a breather. It opens that consciousness moment where you kind of realize what's happening and it makes you aware of the situation.
Yeah.
All right.
I think, it is funny that we keep on telling people to take a pause, right? Like I was making a joke, like, are you going to say take a pause? But I think taking a pause is a good tool for a lot of things. Like if you're angry, if you're not sure if you're conforming or whatever. But what it does is it gives you that space to like be self-aware, like implore a level of awareness of how you feel about the situation, about your actions or non-action, and you get that space to kind of think about it. It's the same thing as when we talk about like do an audit, like at the end of each day, go back and like look at your day, look at the places where, you didn't feel as well, like didn't feel great, right? The things that are hanging on you, right? And why are they? What are your true thoughts about those moments? And like, what can you learn from them? Like, I think the pause and the audit are things that we always talk about throughout the course of our discussions.
Yeah, no, it is, but it's so being transparent. When we started to this journey, Jean, I know, like, part of it when we started implementing the self-discovery section in Naveem, right? Yeah. And we were talking about wording things. You brought up the journaling at the time, right? And we talked about finding values and things. There was a couple of things that at the time I was like, yeah, that makes sense. But I personally didn't realize then how critical those things are helpful for like if you think of every theme that we discuss in the podcast, it helps. It's like taking a break, taking a pause, doing the audit, thinking about it, whether you're getting angry, whether you're conforming. It just helps. And the reason for it, and this is what I had the aha moment this week, is because it helps you, that pause and that work of kind of analyzing at the end of the day what happened, doing the audit or even journaling, helps you get to know yourself better. Right? Yeah. And the more you know yourself, the better, the more you are comfortable and you find out what you like, what you don't like. You end up where we want you to end up is loving who you are. Once you love the great human that you are, present yourself authentically out there.
And then you can start designing your life the way that you want it to be.
Exactly. And you start creating your life. It is true. That's it. That's it. Start creating your life. I love it.
Well, I think that concludes our discussion for today. We've looked at the real daily energy it takes to hide who you are and the profound peace that comes when you finally choose to live openly. If this conversation brought up some patterns you recognize in your own life, please share this episode with someone else who might need to hear it too. We will return next time to look at more ways to connect these deep concepts with our everyday human experience.
And as you head into your week, remember that who you are does not require anyone else's permissions to be valid. Moving away from people pleasing and hiding takes time, and it happens in very small choices. The next time you feel the urge to change your behavior just to make someone else comfortable, take a pause and check in your own values first. Choosing to show up fully is how you build real independence. Until next time, stay connected, stay kind.